Some people are trickling in as we do this, but we need to get started so that we give everyone plenty of time to get their business done. Welcome to Legislative Modernization. Right now, we will start a bill hearing for HB 2614, requiring state agencies to provide the public notice of revocation of administrative rules and regulations and removing abolished state agencies from state agency review requirements. And for that, there you go. And we have Clay Barker here to discuss this for us. Yes? Were you not ready for that? You look very, well, you know what, he's been up all night.
I wasn't sure if you were going to have the advisor describe the bill first.
Oh, that's probably true, sorry. I'll let you do that. Thank you. 2614.
House Bill 2614 is, as the chairperson, Gordon Self, reviser of statutes.
Thank you.
House Bill 2614 is, as you described, it requires state agencies to provide notice of revocation of administrative rules and regulations, and it removes certain abolished or inactive state agencies from the 5-year state agency review requirement. The first statute involved 77426, allows state agencies to revoke administrative rules and regulations. It prescribes the revocation process, including notice, publication, the public hearing requirement, review and approval by the Attorney General of the revocation, and notice to the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules and Regulation. The bill adds a requirement that state agencies shall provide written notice of the proposed revocation to affected businesses, units of local government, and members of the public. The second statute that is amended, 77440, requires that all rules and regulations adopted by state agencies be reviewed by the state agency every 5 years. The state agency is then directed to submit a report to the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules and Regulations on or before July 15 of the year assigned to that agency pursuant to statute. The report shall contain a summary of the agency's review and a statement as to whether the rule and regulation is necessary or may be revoked. The bill, in the statute, there is a schedule of which agencies are supposed to submit this report, and this is to great extent just cleanup where the statutory schedule is amended to remove state agencies that have been abolished or are inactive and have no rules or regulations. And this bill was requested by the Secretary of State's office.
All right, thank you very much. Now we get to Clay Barker. I'm sorry. Yes. Representative Oropesa.
Thank you. I have a question for the reviser. Is there a list of state agencies? Because you made it sound like it wasn't every state agency. Is that correct?
In the statutory list is every state agency. When this legislation was initially enacted, it was every state agency that has rules and regs authority. And what simply happened was there were some agencies included that had been abolished or were inactive agencies, and they had no rules and regs, so they would not be a state agency that would be required to submit a report.
Fall under this.
But it should, the list should include all state agencies that have authority to promulgate rules and regulations.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you.
Representative Schreiber.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Gordon. Along that same line, page 3, line 20, Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks is stricken. Is that, do they not have rules and regs authority, or?
No, they were actually listed twice in the schedule, and so we removed them one of the 2 times. So they're still on the list to submit a report because they do have authority to promulgate rules and regs, and they do have rules and regs.
Okay, sorry, I'm scanning quickly, so I missed that. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you very much. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Clay Barker, General Counsel for the Kansas Secretary of State. And I wanted to, if I could ask the Chair's permission, give a quick preamble to these two bills. They originally started out as one bill, but the reviser correctly pointed out they were two different topics, so now they're broken up. And this comes from a vision for improving the legislative process, but the regulatory side, where the legislature outsources it. I realize there's a lot of complaints about the substance of regulations, unelected bureaucrats going off the rails, not following the legislature's intent, imposing means that are much more draconian than necessary. We have a vision for the other piece, and that is the process that the regulations go through to be approved. And it's been modified in small degrees over time, but we are still stuck with the same 1965, all-paper, rigidly sequential system. And we've met with a lot of other agencies, and probably in the next year or two, you'll get a proposal to put the system online, similar to what the bill tracker does for the legislature, except regulations be a little simpler. We don't have gut and goes and conference committees. It starts, but that would allow, it'd be faster, cheaper, and it would allow earlier intervention. If the legislature thinks a regulation's not going in the right direction, you can see where it's progressing. You'll also have transparency as to where a regulation is in the process. An agency can't say, oh, we submitted that a long time ago, when they actually just did it last week. But, so these two bills are just small steps in that direction. So getting to the bill, SB 2614, this came from meetings with the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules and Regulations, and Representative Washington was the chair of that also. And when the 5-year review process was put in place, which we think is a great idea, it was implemented for the first time last year. All the agencies were broken down into 5 groups, so they were listed. These do it in 2023, these do it in 2024. There was also a provision for expedited revocation of regulations, and the agencies started doing that, getting rid of regulations they no longer needed, because every agency had to say, yes, we need this reg, or no, we don't, we're getting rid of it. And the agencies noticed there was a provision that said if a member of the public wants to have a hearing on the revocation, you have to have a hearing. But there was nothing about how to tell the public to give notice that they wanted a hearing, and the joke became, we need to give notice that someone needs to give notice to have a hearing. And Representative Washington pointed that out, so we put that in the bill, and as long as we were doing that, we decided to get rid of these 22 agencies that no longer exist, that were listed as agencies that had to be reviewed every 5 years. And that's just to clear up confusion. Some people were trying to find these agencies. Do they no longer exist? We can't find their webpage. Where are their regulations? This just clarifies. And the only reason those are still listed in the table of contents for regulations is occasionally, for odd reasons, someone needs to find out what a regulation was from an abolished agency 30 years ago for some legal proceeding. And with that, Madam Chair, I'll stand for questions.
Any questions? Representative Schreiber.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Clay. Kind of tying into wildlife and parks and providing a written notice to members of the public of the proposed revocation. How would you determine what members of the public should be notified? Is it everybody with a hunting and fishing license, or?
Representative, that's an excellent question. We kind of went around to the different agencies, and there was no single way. We put a requirement, you give written notice to the members of the public that's affected. So if it was a regulation on election procedures, we'd tell all the county election officers. You could go to the lobbyist or a trade group, but we really couldn't be more specific than that, except there is a duty to tell the public. And I'd also like to thank the reviser who went through that list of abolished agencies and found 2 or 3 that we thought had been abolished, and he actually pointed out that because of a unique provision, they could still do regulations. We appreciate that.
Do these agencies still have employees? Have we discovered?
It's things like the lottery chair, that they have special provisions for regulations, and so they're still on here.
Okay. Representative Oropeza.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And then when they're doing public notice, is this all a standard of how they apply for it, or revocation? Is it standard across the agency, or is it very agency specific?
The process for expedited revocation, Representative, is laid out in the law. The Attorney General has to look at it, and you give notice that you're revoking it. The one piece where they seem to be missing a step was letting the public know that you're revoking a regulation. And at first I thought, who could be against revoking regs? But then I realized some people may say that regulation protected my safety, I think it should remain, so they may ask for a hearing.
Okay, and that is standard across the agencies? Okay, thank you.
And just as an aside, in joint rules and regs, it seemed like we just kept adding rules and regulations. And no one was going back to see if any of them had really just kind of expired or they weren't being used anymore. And so that was the biggest impetus to try to clean up rules and regs. And there was quite a bit of disagreement from agencies thinking that was just too much. But a lot of the agencies have gone ahead and immediately started figuring out what they needed to get rid of. So are there any other questions? All right, if not, then we can probably move on to HB 2615, and the revisor will talk about that.
Gordon Self, Revisor of Statutes. I make one more comment on the previous bill, and that was not making an excuse, but the reason that these agencies were listed was simply that when the bill was drafted, we were looking at the table of contents, and all of the agencies were listed, even agencies, as Mr. Barker indicated, that were abolished or inactive, but they had rules and regs at some point. House Bill 2615 is a companion bill that was requested by the Secretary of State's office, and it relates to the publishing, printing, and distribution of state laws and administrative rules and regulations. It affects a number of changes throughout, but I dare say they could be categorized as cleanup to a great extent and technical amendments that help match the statutes with the processes that are in place. Specifically, there's a provision that relates to removing the state printer from the timeline for printing the session laws because the responsibility is with the Secretary of State's office. There is a provision that most of the bill relates to statutory references to the rules and regs, the volumes and the supplements as a result of publishing the regulations electronically rather than in book form, and some of the references were cleaned up as that transition to electronic publication of the KARs occurs. It also requires the Secretary of State to maintain a searchable database of all rules and regulations and to set the prices for the publication of the rules and regs to cover the costs of publishing, maintaining, and storing the rules and regulation and the databases in electronic form. There's also a provision that changes the current law that the current law provides that each member of the legislature and certain elected officials will receive a copy of the statute books and the supplements, and this changes it to only receives, a member of the legislature or an elected official would only receive them when they request that. So it wouldn't be an automatic distribution by the Secretary of State's office.
All right, thank you very much. Any questions of the revisor? Oh, Representative Howerton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On page 1, line 20, you struck out "or before." Is there a reason for that? You have it "on July 1st" instead of "on or before July 1st"?
I'll let the Secretary of State's office speak to that. The practical is, jumping in here, the practical effect is the session laws come out on July 1. They don't come out before.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to Secretary of State's office. Welcome to committee again.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, Clay Barker, General Counsel for the Kansas Secretary of State. And I was a little remiss. My colleague Whitney Temple is really a driver for all of this, but she's in Washington, D.C. today because the Secretary Scott Schwab is the president of the National Secretary of States Association. They're having their meeting, and he really couldn't miss that being president. So I'm kind of filling in. This bill we see as the final part of a big step forward in regulations. As the reviser said, there's some small pieces to this. When we bring our wagons around every year full of statute books, some legislators didn't want them. And so we now will ask the legislators, do you want a copy, and deliver it? And same thing with the governor's office and other offices. And that was just a response to some legislative input. On the session law piece, 2 years ago, the legislature gave our office authority to we didn't have to use the state printer. We could go find the cheapest publisher for publications, and this was just a minor cleanup where the printer was still left in as to the initial publication of the session laws. Now, getting on to the meat of this bill, which is the regulation process. In 2006, our office, for the very first time, and I don't know if Representative Bourgeon was there at the time, we put PDFs of the regulations up as a public service. In 2018, in response to a legislative directive, we put the regulations online in a searchable format. And that took a lot of proofreading to make sure it was transitioned correctly. In 2021, the legislature gave us permission to no longer use printed versions of regulations, but go all online. And last year, we printed, or more than a year ago, the last version of the regulations in book form, and no one noticed that we've gone a year without it, so we're now finishing this off. And these are all free to the public. There's no charge, and it's completely available. There's 3 reasons why we go completely online, and the difference is the online version is now the official version, which is very important to lawyers. Before that, they had to use the books in courts, and we've told the court system that the online is now the official. One is that it's more user-friendly. You can print off, copy, click. Agencies can link directly to it and say, here's the online, and you can search for it by words or terms. Second, and I brought some props here just to show you the old system, is, all right, sorry. So we would print about every 4 or 5 years like a base regulation book that would have regulations from 1 to whatever. And that would stay around. And then every year after that, we would get a supplement, which would be any additions or changes. And the supplements would go in order, and they would just keep getting bigger and bigger. You'd get 2019. When 2020 came, you'd toss 2019. And then anything new after the supplement, because unlike laws that tend to all come out at once, regulations just come out in a constant stream all year long, you'd have to check the register to see if anything was new. So if someone was researching a regulation, they would literally, and I remember this when I went to law school decades ago, have to have 3 books open at the same time, because you didn't know what had been changed from the base, added, taken away, check the register. Now the online version is immediately up to date. As soon as something's adopted, it's online that day. And by the way, the register was no longer published in paper form 3 years ago. Again, no one noticed. It's all online now, and you get it by email with a subscription, which I think shows you that society's moving that way. And third, there's cost savings. You no longer have to print and pay for storage. And there's some other minor provisions in there, like the State Rules and Regulations Board, which is another group involved with this. Since 1965, always had to vote at the end of the year that what regulations would be in the printed version. But now that it's online, everything is online. The old reason was sometimes a reg might have a big fold-out sheet of paper or something that was too voluminous, and the board would agree that that didn't have to be printed. Now everything's online, so the board no longer has to vote on that. So there's a lot of little cleanup pieces to this. But essentially, we're just finishing off the process that we were authorized to do 2 years ago, and we think it's a much better service to the public. And with that, Madam Chair, I'll stand for any questions.
Okay, can you just answer? I know that Representative Carpenter has a question, so I'll let him go first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So thank you for your testimony today. I was looking at the website that has the rules and regulations on it while you were talking, and I noticed that it's, you can select an agency and then try to find a rule or reg in there. If I, say, wanted to almost break my computer and put all of the regulations into, one document and just see them, all streamlined so I can do search functions or whatever, is that a possibility today or no?
Representative, you can search for terms, so it can pull up different ones. But otherwise, you pull up each regulation one by one, and then you can hit next, 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 a little bit like the statutes or previous, if you're in a certain article subject of the regulation.
So there's no way for me to put all regulations into one document on my computer?
Unless you were to essentially cut and paste one by one, but not have them all together. But now that this is the official version, it will be on our priority list to update. at the office. We have a lot of stuff online, and our IT group goes through it. The secretary gives us a priority list and updates it, just like we updated our corporate filings last month. That was a 5-year project. Notaries are now online. That was a 1-year project. So we realized this, and things, I know, like lobbyist filings, campaign filings are a little clunky, but they're on the priority list. We only have so many resources to update, but good point, Representative.
All right, thank you.
I think the Secretary of State's office was really excited that we had this committee, because last year they're like, we were talking about trying to be a little more paperless. And because they printed so many of these, they were also having to get rid of them in big dumpsters. So this is pretty huge, I think, in terms of not wasting as much and not spending as much. How much do you think it's going to save the Secretary of State's office to not have to print these?
I'm sure that, I did see a fiscal note. I don't think it was online, but probably total about $30,000 for printing costs and a small amount for warehouse. And the only reason we have to throw away some books at the end is you have to order them ahead of time, predict what you think the demand would be, and have a little extra just in case. And then at the life cycle end, like for a supplement, we save a few and get rid of the rest to make more space in the warehouse.
Okay. Representative Turner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. See, I remember, and I had it on my desk to bring and I forgot it, but when the what are they, the supplements came out this year, there was a little piece of paper on there that said you won't get these in the future unless you request them. Do you remember that, or are you familiar with that? This year, when those white supplement books, they already had a piece of paper that said, in the future, these won't come unless you request them. But it looks like this is the bill that will actually make that right. Am I understanding correctly?
For regulations and statutes, yes, that's correct.
Okay, so I'm not clear.
Sounds like we got a little ahead of ourselves.
When my supplements came from my statute books, there's already a piece of paper that came out when we first started this session that said you won't get these in the future unless you request them. But it sounds like this bill is the one that will actually affect that change, correct?
That sounds correct, Representative. I can check back at the office. I kind of remember discussion of that, but I didn't see it, and I was busy that day, so I couldn't help deliver the books. But
does anybody else remember that piece of paper? I can go down and grab it. Okay, I was going to say, wait, I meant to bring it, and I left it on my desk. But
I'm sure Representative, I'll get back to you on that.
I think they were pretty self-assured that this would be all right. So I'm not sure. They probably could have gotten in trouble had everyone decided we all need to have everything printed again. But I don't think that was a big problem. Are there any other questions for Representative Howerton?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm looking at the fiscal note. It says that in the last line, the agency estimates fee fund revenues would decrease by $300,000 in F year 2025 and $300,000 in F year 2026. Does that sound right?
Representative, I saw it for the first time this morning. That's from the Department of Administration, talking about the state printer, and I'm not sure where that number came from. I brought our numbers, and we only spend about $30,000 on the session laws, 20-something on regulations. I don't know where the $300,000 came from, and we can still use the state printer. We've just been given the authority to look at other printers. That's why it was pointed out that this book is blue because Envision printed it in Wichita, and this one is gray because the state printer did it. We try to get the best cost for the taxpayers. So I'm not sure where that number came from, and I really can't comment on it.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no more questions, thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
In order to tidy things up, if someone would like to make a motion to suspend the rules in order to vote on these, to move them forward, I would entertain that at this moment.
Madam Chair,
I hear a motion to suspend the rules and I'm sorry, Representative Carpenter.
thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to, because I believe these bills are of a non-controversial nature and should have wide and broad support, I move that we suspend the rule and work these bills today.
Madam Chair, I will second.
And that's I have a motion from Representative Carpenter and a second from Representative Penn. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? No. There's always someone in the group that wants to cause problems. All right, well then, what is the committee's feelings on these? Representative Carpenter.
I guess I'll make the motion on the first one, since we have to work these individually. Madam Chair, I move that we pass House Bill 2614 favorably for passage.
I have the motion from Representative Carpenter, a second from Representative Howerton. All those in favor? Aye. Oh, I'm sorry, there's no, I didn't ask for discussion. I'm sorry, I am on so many cold medicines, different, that my whole head is like, let's just get this done. I'll cough on your side next. Representative Stockstill.
Yes, the only reason I objected to this, after hearing the discussion today, I would like to go over the bill again, just based on what we've heard here today, and perhaps do this tomorrow. I don't think we need to rush this through. If we could do it tomorrow just as easily, and we'd
don't
have
have
time
to
to take a
tomorrow.
look at that. Pardon?
We don't have
Or, well, next Monday. Yeah.
All right. Is there any other discussion? Representative Oropeza.
As I looked over the bill, there wasn't a timeline of when this will be instituted. Is that correct, or did I miss something?
Oh, my gosh. Probably it will be effective on,
Okay.
on publication. Is that correct? Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Representative Penn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And committee, I appreciate you all coming together for this. As the Vice Chair said, it's non-controversial, and it does hit at some of the things that we pulled out and elucidated in our subcommittee. So I appreciate the work of the committee, and thanks for all the conferees being here today. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Anything else? Representative Carpenter?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move my motion.
All right. We have, the motion is moved. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
No.
All right. All right, then we move on to HB 2614 is passed, and we'll move on to the legislature. The committee as a whole. All right, now we move on to HB 2615. Do I see a motion? Representative Carpenter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that we pass House Bill 2615 favorably for passage.
We have a second with Representative Howerton. Did you have a comment as well? No? Is there anyone else that wants to comment? Oh, Representative Wagner.
Yeah, no, my question is, of course, at the end, this act shall take effect and be enforced from and after its publication in the statute book. So is that language archaic now, or is there, I mean, yeah, is there any, I don't know if Secretary of State's office has a comment, or is he already gone?
He left. Would the revisor address that, please?
It would be exact now. In the past, statute book meant when it was published, which was on or before July 1, but tradition and I think the difficulty of getting the session laws together, the session laws were always published on July 1. So the language that relates to statute book means July 1 of this year.
All right. We already voted on all these, didn't we? Okay, let's vote on House Bill 2615. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? HB 2615 is now moved on to the legislature. Thank you, everyone. At this point, we're going to move to the informational briefing and executive session with Katrin Osterhaus, Legislative Division of Post Audit. I'll ask for a motion. Representative Carpenter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that the open meeting of the House Legislative Modernization Committee be recessed for a closed or executive meeting pursuant to KSA 754319A to discuss subjects relating to security measures of the Kansas Judicial Branch, the State Board of Healing Arts, Kansas State University, and the Kansas Department for Aging against and the Kansas Department for I think it's supposed to be Aging and Disability Services, with Chris Clark, Post Auditor, Katrin Osterhaus, IT Audit Manager, and Alex Gard, Principal IT Auditor, pursuant to KSA 754319B12C. Yeah. Okay, so, and then we're going to add to that list Larry Bowles, Susan Giles, and Jeff Maxon from Healing Art. Well, Jeff Maxon's not from Healing Arts, but Larry is from Healing Arts. Or all these other people. Okay, including Marissa Bayless, Amy Deckard, Stephanie Smith, Ann Madden Johnson, I already mentioned him. And this is pursuant to KSA 754319B12C because the discussion of such subjects in an open meeting would jeopardize such security measures that the committee resume the open meeting in room 218 north of the State House at what time do you want us to come back? Public meeting.
Katrin, how long do you need, do you think?
I get.
Okay, so 10:15 a.m.
At 10:15 a.m., that the discussion during the closed or executive meeting shall be limited to those subjects stated in this motion and to record this motion, if adopted, as part of the permanent records of the committee.
Do I have a second? Okay, thank you. Seconded by Representative Hoagland. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, then we will go into closed session. And we'll give people a chance to get out, and we'll usher you in as you're needed. Obviously, we did not complete what we were doing, and so I was going to ask if legislative post-audit could come back perhaps on Monday so that we can complete some of this. I think it was a lot to take in. So this is one of the reasons why I wanted to have this, so everyone on the committee had the same feeling of import. So Representative Oropeza.
Madam Chair, I had an additional question. Can I just pose that to you to ask the appropriate person via email? Is that fine?
Please, yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, can you all come back as well, please? The judiciary, I think we need to finish up a little bit. And Representative Riley.
Madam Chair, I'm used to, after an executive session, making some kind of statement that there wasn't any.
No action was taken.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Is there any other question or comment at this time? And let's hope we can finish this on Monday. At this point, I guess our meeting is adjourned.